Hi guys, and welcome to another Creative Tap tutorial. This is lesson 7 in our motion tracking series, and in this series we're going to be we're going to be looking at how to do some planar tracking. So you can see in this example I've just got a piece of footage with this sign here, and then when we look at our merge node we've actually motion tracked a caution quarantine logo and text to this sign. Okay, this kind of ties in with the current COVID-19 thing which we're going through. I don't know, this will probably be posted in about a month's time, to be honest, so we could be out of it, I don't know. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to be motion tracking or planar tracking this sign. I'll make the footage available to you, and then I'll show you how to create your own sign with inside Photoshop, and then put it on our actual sign in Nuke. Okay, so let's dive on in. Now the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to get my footage, and what I've done is I've exported it. So I've got a MOV here, and you can see this is a TIFF sequence. Okay, I've exported my MOV as a bunch of TIFFs, and I've got 199 frames. Okay, 1 to 199. Okay, so I'm going to get my TIFF sequence. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to view it, and what we can start off by doing is we can start off by actually just previewing it through, so we can see that this, because we want to track something to the whole surface, the whole plane, you can probably get away with, you might be able to get away with a 2-point track, but especially because you're putting a new image on a flat plane, planar track is going to be the best for this. Now the way a planar tracker works is we're going to draw a roto shape around the area we want to track, which will be this sign, and it's going to look for loads of different points within that surface. It's going to get a range from up here and a range from down here, and because they're opposite corners, that will be quite a nice one, and it'll give it a good range of stuff to track. The other good thing is this is a reflective sign. You can see some reflections, but the reflections are really still within here. Okay, if there was a car with street lights with headlights going past, that may add some moving reflections, which could make things difficult. But this is quite a nice, easy shot to start off with. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to create a new roto node just by hitting O on my keyboard. I'm going to drag that roto node into my stream. So what I want to do is I want to draw around the area that I want to do my planar track on. Okay. So I'm on frame 97. Whatever frame you draw your first roto shape on to make that your planar track, that's going to be your reference frame. So I'm happy with 97. It's what I used before. So yeah, let's dive on in. I'm going to get my roto splines, my bezier, and I'm literally just going to draw around relatively neatly, just this little green sign by here. Okay, I'm going to come all the way up and just around this. And you can obviously come back in and clean this up later. I may need to. But yeah, I'm happy with how that's going down there. And come across and come around the corner. And then finally come down and then finish my roto shape. So I've drawn a roto shape around the sign. That's what I want to track. What we can now do is if we right click on our Bezier 1, you can change that to planar track. All of a sudden you've got something called planar track layer. You can see 97 has got a keyframe on it. This is now our reference frame. We can change reference frames, so go to set current frame to reference frame. You can change them, but I'm just going to keep mine for now because it's all in shot and it's fine. So you've got our Bezier within our planar track layer. Now, like I said, we can, within our planar tracker, we can track translate, which is your X, Y, up and down. You can track scale, you can track rotation, shearing, and perspective. So translation, scale, and rotation. If you only needed to do translation, scale, and rotation, well, you can do that with just the tracker. The two new additions here are shear and perspective. Okay, so just like with the tracker, you've got some other options up here, like these options will like label points. So if you click this on and off, you can see how our points are labeled and all that. I'm going to turn it off for now. Just like with the tracking workflow, you can track forward and track backwards. So that's what I'm going to do, and we're going to have a look and see how it copes. Okay, so I'm going to click track forward. And now that is tracked all the way back, you can see that it follows, that our rotor shape follows. So if we come to 97, I'm now going to track forward. Okay, so now that I've let that track to the end as well, you can see that our rotor shape actually follows our sign, okay, and you can play that throughout as well. So I'm going to come on to the next bit, which is these 4 icons along the top. So you've got one by here, and this is called Center Planar Surface. What this will do is it'll center this surface throughout the whole shot. So if you scrub through, you can see it's doing a little sort of jumping around. I think it's just caching. You can see that surface is sticking in the center throughout the shot, and if you play it through, you can see that surface sticks within the center. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. You've also got 3 other icons. So you've got Display Planar Surface. So if I click Display Planar Surface, that's basically, we want to match the corners up of this blue square, to the corners of our sign. And we can't just click and drag. Well, yeah, we can't. So if you do click and drag and it disappears, what you've got to do, click Planar Track Layer and it'll come back. In order to match this up, 2 important things. Where you drew your first frame, for me, frame 97, you've got to come to that one, because you'll notice all the others are blue. When you come onto here, your reference frame, yellow. Now up here, you can go to, you can click Go To Reference Frame. You can also select a frame and you can set that to the current reference frame, but I don't want to, because I know 97 is where I've exported a frame and created a new sign. So mine's 97, all right? You can also, got 2 other icons here. You got Correct Plane. Now you can click this and then you can start only on your reference frame, which is 97 for me. You can then start clicking and matching this surface up, much like you would in Mocha. But remember, guys, when you do this, make sure you are on your reference frame. And again, you can click up here to go to reference frame, and it's the frame where the plane turns yellow instead of blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to match mine up. But also, as I do, if you click this as well, you've got a perspective grid which turns on, and that shows you, that gives you an extra guidance as well. So with mine, I'm just going to make sure that this line coming down and the line going across matches up with these green lines. This is a rounded green corner, so the point's not going to be dead on it. So if I come across, I've done that one. I'm now going to bring this one in, just make sure these lines leaving it match, going across and down. Yeah, that's looking like it's getting there. And then this one, just make sure that this line going up and across match the green. And our final one over here is going to be this one. And you can go through and have another little check. But if I look at my perspective grid, you can see this orange line is fallen on the edge of this road line. Okay, now this road line I know is relatively straight. And it's matching up for the most part. Maybe you could say that it's not matching up down here, so you could come and have a look. Maybe just make sure you pull this out just a touch bit more, and maybe make sure that one's hugging nice and tight. And let's come back up to the top and just make sure, yeah, nice and tight around there. And I think that this one over in this corner can perhaps come down a smidgen. Okay, I'm happy with that now. You can see the perspective lines matching up. You can see this line's matching up better now. So that's one way. That's the way you kind of match it up. Now, if I play through, you'll see that this grid actually follows the sign throughout, which is another good sign that you've got a good planar track. So I'll come back to frame 97, which is my reference frame. We've set all that up. Now what you can do is, if it's not sticking throughout, let's come to our dope sheet. You can see in here we've got our Bezier curve. On frame 97 we've got this curve because that's where we drew our roto shape. You've also got all these trackers, okay, and you've got point 1, 2, 3 and 4. These are these points by here which we've kind of moved. Okay, so if I come back up, again remember you only want to move these points, point 1, 2, 3 and 4, which we've got down here. You only want to move these on your reference frame. However, if you do notice it's slipping, you can come to later on, and let's say I just move this one, for example. You'll notice, what you'll notice is we've now got something called, if we scrub through, we can see that this is what's happening now. We've got it over time adjusting, so it matches all the way until frame 97, and then because you've set an offset keyframe, it then moves. So if you do need to do some manual adjustments, you can, okay? And let's come back back into our dope sheet, you can see we've got something called off to. Off just means offset, but I don't need an offset, so I'm not gonna do mine. Okay, so I'm gonna undo all that. So now when I scrub through mine's working perfectly. I don't need an offset. I know mine's fine. So the next thing we want to do is we've got our planar track working. Next thing we want to do is we want to actually make something to put on this sign, and we want to apply that data. So if I come to the tracking tab of our roto, tracking tab, you can go export, and we've got corner pin stabilize. Corner pin stabilize, that's just going to basically, if you turn your stabilization on over here, it'll stabilize the shot around the track that it's done. So you can do that if you want. Click create, and then you can plug this in to your footage and it'll just stabilize it. I don't want to do that. You've also got a tracker. Basically, if you hover over, it'll actually tell you as well what each of these do. If you hover over, maybe not. That'll just export a tracker with these 4 points tracked. Okay, so you can use that. The ones we're going to be concerned about are corner pin 2D, relative, and absolute. And I'm going to show you the difference between these. Okay, so I'm going to make a corner pin relative first of all. You can see it's got this expression line saying it's linked to this roto node, and I'm going to do an absolute as well. And there you go. Got absolute and relative. So the difference between relative and absolute. Absolute will stretch. Let's just make a color wheel. Color wheel. Okay, let's just make a color wheel. Now, if I merge this to my relative first of all, okay, and then I'm just going to put this corner pin on top of my footage. So let's just bring this. Let's put a merge between them both, and A over B. Let's view. What you'll notice is this circle now is following that sign, but we can't really see. So first of all, I'm just going to put a transform in here and scale this down. Okay, so you can see that as we play through, this color wheel is now following that surface, but it's not necessarily pulling it to fit the perspective. So let's get our color wheel. So that's relative. Relative doesn't stretch whatever your input is to fit. Okay. However, if we get this color wheel and we come across and hook it into absolute, now let's have a look and see what happens here. Well, you can see it's stretching this color wheel to fit. So it takes it from its original dimensions, which is 1920 by 1080, and it stretches it to fit the sign. So you could argue that, yeah, this circle looks as if it's on there a bit better with the absolute, but what if we want a perfect circle on there? Well, that's where we would use relative, see? So we'd come in and we've got our transform, but then we can put another corner pin in here, for example, corner pin, and we can actually play around in this corner pin with the actual perspective of our, let's just turn this off, with the perspective of our thing. So we can do the perspective ourselves. Basically, absolute, let's turn that back on, absolute will stretch it to conform to the sign, relative won't. And relative, basically, if you want to put a circle on there, you can kind of do it yourself. Okay, so that's the difference between them. We're going to be using absolute, and I'll show you why. Okay, let's just delete that and delete all that. Okay, so we know we're going to be using absolute. What I've done is I know that 97, frame 97 is my reference frame, and I want to put a quarantine sign on here. So what I've done is I've exported a single frame. So I've got my right node, and I've said, or if you've already exported a TIFF sequence, you'll have, frame 97. Okay. What I've done is I've opened that up inside of Photoshop. So once I open up my sign inside of Photoshop, I've done quite a few things in here. First of all, I've got my sign. Okay, let's just delete these by here. Actually, I won't delete them yet. I've got my sign. I've gone in with my clone stamp tool. So very quickly, I've gone in with my clone stamp tool and my spot healing brush tool. What you can do is you can come in and you can start, let's get the clone stamp tool, Alt select, okay, and I basically started copying these across, and I started painting this out. Okay, so with the clone stamp tool, Alt select, and I've just done this loads and loads of times. Okay, and make sure these lines, see these lines coming across here, make sure you keep these lines. So for example, let's just get this little bit by here, make the brush a little bit smaller, and just paint these lines so these lines are consistently going across. okay, and I'm basically using this tool, sourcing different areas repeatedly, and I am cleaning, first of all, cleaning up this sign, okay? You may want to go with a soft brush, and you may want to lower the opacity at some points to really keep a variation, because you've got dark green over here, you've got lighter green over here. So if you put very light green on this dark green, or vice versa up here, you can see it doesn't gel well. So you want to take your time with it, keep sourcing different little bits. So just make sure this line runs across as well. Keep sourcing different bits and just build this up. You can see that doesn't blend in well by there. So what I might do is I might turn down my opacity, source another bit, and just blend that edge in a bit more, okay? Once I've done that, all right, I'm going to turn it off. Once I've done that, I've got this. I've painted out the sign. However, I want my sign to be yellow. It's good that we're keeping in a lot of detail. There's some smudges still in there. Okay, so if we turn this off, you can see there's some smudges, but there, around here on the original. We're keeping them in, all right? And what I'm doing then is I want to turn it yellow. So I've got curves. If we just have a quick look at my curves, I'm just bringing up the green and the red, bringing down the blue. And when I turn that on, we've got a yellow. I've then got the brightness and contrast. So I've gone down in the contrast and up in the brightness just to get that. And then the levels, I didn't really do much in the levels. I just moved the gamma from 1 to 0.9, and it doesn't really make much of a difference. But this is what we've done. We've color corrected it now. So all I can do now is put on my text this. So I've made my text further down here, but I've actually merged it in a layer. So I've got caution, and I've got this area is under quarantine, but you can see they're on one layer merged up here. So I turn them on, and I've gone for the blending mode of soft light, and I also duplicated that because I wanted it a little bit harsher. So still 2 layers of my text on soft light. So I've got text and the logo, and I've put them on soft light, okay. I think I've put a 1 pixel blur in there as well, just to make them fit. And then I've got my sign. However, this wasn't perfect because I've got the background in as well. So what I did is I selected all of my layers, hit Command, Alt, Shift, and E. So Command, Alt, Shift, and E. That'll be, sorry, Control, Alt, Shift, and E. On a Mac, that'll be Command, Option, Shift, and E. What that does, by hitting that, it takes all of the selected layers, which you've just selected, and it makes a new layer out of them above, okay? So I'm going to turn all of these off, and this is what we've got, okay? We've got our new layer. So let's just turn this bottom one off. So now that we've got this as our single layer, we now need to get rid of the background, so we just keep the yellow bit, all right? So I've done that with our curves and adjustments layers down here. I've given it a layer mask. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to get my lasso tool by here. I'm going to zoom in, right? Zoom on up to it, and I'm basically very quickly going to cut around, just like this, cut around the area that I want to keep. I'm going to go quite rough, but I'm going to come down like so. You can go around with any of the lasso tools, but I just find the polygonal one the easiest. Just keep on cutting round until you've gone all the way around. And right, I'm going to do mine a lot quicker now because I don't want to waste too much time. So come across like so, click, and come up to the top, click, and click round, okay? What you'll have then is you'll have a selection. And what you can do is click this layer mask when you've got your layer selected, and you've got your sign on its own, okay? That's what I also did for these levels down here, by the way. So the levels and the curves only affected that area. I layer masked them, all right? What you need to do then is you need to save this out as a TIFF, okay, and then we can jump back into Nuke. Also, when you are saving out from Photoshop, make sure you click Save Transparency, because that'll give you an alpha channel. And I also, just for sizing, I don't bother keeping the layers because I've got a Photoshop file where I've got all the layers. So let's make sure Save Transparency is ticked. Now, let's jump back into Nuke. Okay, so what we've got is I've got my quarantine sign. I'm not going to re-import it again, but if you do, you just need to hit R on the keyboard and you can read it in. Okay, so what I can do now is I've got my corner pin. I'll hook that up to my sign, and let's hook up our A pipe, and let's have a look at what we've got. Okay, so you'll see, well, that's a bit weird. What's going on? It should be matching, and it does follow along with it, but we've got this problem where it's warping it, and that's because we're using absolute. Okay, so if we were using relative, let's have a look at what relative would do. So relative, and click create, and let's hook relative up there, and yeah, well, that one's working a lot better. So you can use relative or absolute. Now, when I've used absolute, what I've done, because you can see I've used absolute over here. So let's go. You can use relative, and that's a quick way of doing it, because we know this sign matches exactly, because we've exported a frame and we've redone the sign, and it matches exactly on that frame. We know that relative is going to work, and it's going to pull it around. So let's just get rid of this. You can see that relative, yeah, it actually works. If you did, for whatever reason, need to use absolute, I'll show you how I've done it. We've got absolute, so let's go to our reference frame 97. What I've done in here is you've got from and to, so where it's warping it from and where it's warping it to, okay? What I've done is in from, I've copied, so on the reference frame, I've copied 630. I'm not copying the animation, but I've copied 630, so from, I'm basically copying and pasting these values, okay? So at the moment it's saying I'm taking it from the edge and I'm squeezing it down, but we want to take it from point A almost on top to point B, okay? But if this bit does confuse you, don't worry, just use, if you've done the same as me and redone a sign, just use relative instead of absolute. Okay, but I'm just going to paste all these in just to prove you that it does work. Paste all these in. You'll notice that when I paste them in, they're not coming blue, and that's because I'm just pasting that one keyframed value on my reference frame. They're not blue like these ones, because blue means it's got an animation on there, and we're just copying the one value, not across time. Okay, so if I copy these across, now if I play, it's essentially kind of doing the same as the relative is doing, but you know, I can put a little transform node in here if I want to make it a little bit bigger or smaller for whatever reason. You can, and again, that'll follow through all the shot. All right, you can also put on motion blur. I normally turn this to 1. Okay, sorry, you can do that in this corner pin node, so I'd only do it in one of the nodes. So do it in the corner pin node, change that one back to 0, and I don't actually need this transform node. And yeah, basically, that is how you do your planar track, okay? So we've gone through tracking and how we export into Photoshop and recreate a new sign and then apply that data, okay? And again, if you did have trouble with absolute, if you've done the same as me, what you can do is just go and create instead a relative. Yeah, relative. And it'll do the same thing as I did manually then with that one, okay? And you can see, works the same, sticks throughout. Turn these off because they're distracting. And there is your track. So cheers for tuning in. Check out some of our other match moving tutorials. Leave a comment if it helped you. Tell us what you want to see next. And yeah, cheers for tuning in.